Namaste. My name's Jeff Hippler, and I'm going to give a quick overview of Samkhya philosophy. Samkhya philosophy is very important to learn when you're starting to understand a lot of the yoga philosophy. Samkhya is the underlying philosophy of both the Yoga Sutras and the Bhagavad Gita. It's the foundational tenets of Samkhya are what drive both of those literature. So if you really want to understand what Lord Krishna is talking about in his discussion with Arjuna, or if you really want to get a deep understanding of Patanjali and Patanjali's Yoga Sutras and what the pieces really are that he's talking about, Samkhya philosophy is a key foundation. In the talk today, we'll give a brief overview of Samkhya, and then in later lectures, we'll go into some of these details in more context. One of the issues that I found with Samkhya is it's presented as a philosophy, but it's presented very dry and trying to understand what to do with it. You know the elements, you got the pieces, but now what? And so stick with me. We're going to get to the now what eventually. So let's just jump into it and see where it goes. So Sankhya philosophy, Sankhya, Sankhya, is built around the tenet of two pieces. There's two pieces. Hopefully you've heard these before. You have Purusha and you have Prakriti. Purusha and Prakriti are the two key elements of Samkhya. So what are these two pieces? Purusha you can define as consciousness. Consciousness. Purusha is our consciousness. It's our awareness. It's our knowing that we are. And Prakriti, a quick definition, an easy definition, you can say is nature. It's our nature. What do you mean by our nature? And how does that fit in? And what is life? So you have consciousness, you have nature. Consciousness is the awareness, nature is everything that we see and exists. And life, this comes back to what is life? Life is the merging of consciousness and nature. When Purusha illuminates Prakriti, when the consciousness illuminates dormant matter, you have life. And so our life, you can look at it as a merging of consciousness and nature, Purusha and Prakriti. And so Prakriti has 24 elements. There are 24 elements in Prakriti. Purusha is just one. So when you jump in and say, oh, the 25 elements of Purusha Prakriti, this is what we're talking about. And the first part of Prakriti is our Mula Prakriti. Mula Prakriti, R-A-K-R-T-I. Mula Prakriti, that is our unmanifest manner. Mula Prakriti is nature, but Mula means big, beyond, great. So that is the great unmanifest Prakriti nature. And we go past here, beyond Prakriti. The next step we have is our intellect. I-N-T-E-L-L-E-C-T, intellect. The Mula Prakriti evolves. There's an evolutionary process. You always go from subtle to gross. As above, so below. Subtleness condenses into grosser matter. That's what we're doing here. Purusha, very subtle. Prakriti, Mula Prakriti, unmanifest, so subtle. And then we go to our intellect. The intellect, and you can see in a lot of the literature, is called the Buddhi, Buddhi. The intellect as our Buddhi. The Buddhi intellect that um, condenses a little bit further into the ego. The ego, the whole sense that I am, everything below that belongs to me. This is mine, the ego. The ego can be called the ahamkara, Ahamkar, ahamkara, the ego. The ego condenses a little bit further into the mind, which is manas, M-A-N-A-S, the mind. And so we have, you've often heard, talking about mind, ego, intellect, manas, ahamkari, buddhi, the three initial evolutes of the Mula Prakriti in the Prakriti nature. And these three elements here, intellect, ego, and mind, all become the chitta, Chitta, chitta. And so when you get into the first chapter of first verse, first sutra of the Yoga Sutras, Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha, yoga is a cessation of the fluctuations of the chitta. And so we're trying to get rid of the fluctuations of the chitta, trying to stop the mind, ego, intellect from engaging. So this is where we're going. Stick with me as we'll go through the last of the 20 elements, and we'll go into this and then build it back up. First we have to lay the foundation, then we'll build it up. The mind condenses even further as the mind goes into two pieces. And you may have ran into these in your studies. We have the Jnanendriya, which is the five elements of sense perception. And you can also, the mind devolves into the Karmendriya, the five elements of motor action. So let's go into these a little bit more. Move our arrows down so it looks a little bit better. And so the manas goes to the Jnanendriya. Jnana is Sanskrit for knowledge. So whenever you see jhana, it's knowledge. So Jnanendriya, driya is the elements. And so Jnanendriya are the five elements of sense perception. We have the ears, the skin, the eyes, the tongue, and the nose. You could call those the five senses. In here, it's called the five elements of sense perception. And then you also have the Karmendriya. Karma, as you can recall, karma means action. So Karmendriya are the five elements of motor action. You have the mouth, the arms, the legs, the excretory, and the reproductive. So the five elements of motor action, the five elements of sense perception. These will be useful. We'll explain these a little bit more. Maybe not this talk, but as we get into further talks, just knowing where this comes from becomes very useful. The ego also has an evolute. As the ego, the Himkara, evolves into the Tanmatra. The Tanmatra are the five elements of smell, taste, form, sound, and touch. They are the five elements that make up the world. Smell, taste, form, touch, sound, the Tanmatra. And then the Tanmatra devolves into the Mahabhuta. The Bhuta meaning the elements, the initial elements, the elements that make up our world. So the elements that make up the world, we have earth, water, fire, air, and plasma, or you could say ether. So we have earth, water, fire, air, and ether, and these correspond to our five elements of our five senses of smell, taste, form, touch, and sound. So five elements of the world, five really actions of sense perception. We have these energies of karmandriya, the five motions of action, and then we have the five elements of the sense perception. And you can see these are color coded for a specific reason. We have red, orange, kind of yellow, yeah, green and blue. They're not quite colors because I had to make them show up, but you can think of these as red, orange, yellow, green, blue, all the way up. We have these five elements. And these five elements come out of, as you might know, the gunas. We can think of, that was a good one, the gunas. If you see the gunas, we have you have three gunas. You have sattva, S-A-T-T-V-A, sattva, raja, and tamas. Sattva, raja, tamas are the three gunas, which are the three binding constituents of Prakriti. And tamas is the retentive element. It retains energy. It retains things. If you don't have any retention, you can't hold on to things. Rajas is a mutative element. It causes things to change, things to move. And sattva is the divine essence, the underlying essence of the element itself. And so we can take these, erase those, and move them down. Would have been good to do those initially, but we could say, put sattva here, and let's say sattva, S-A-T-T-V-A, sattva, rajas, and tamas. And then here we have sattva, rajas, S and R, and here we have rajas, tamas. So the three become five by taking the intersections of each of those two. So now we have the three gunas become five, gunas plus combinations of them. And these five gunas and combinations now map across each of these 20 elements. So tamas is our retentive nature. This retentive nature goes to the nose because it knows, when you smell things, it brings back long memories. So the odors, the scents, all of those are deeply ingrained in the brain. Those are very retentive. And over here on this side, we have the earth solid, very heavy, very retentive and reproductive. It retains, it keeps everything going. Without reproduction, life here would end because we wouldn't be able to retain the momentum. Rajas, the mutative, the changing aspect of nature. You have fire. Fire is very rajas. It changes, it keeps moving. Forms keep changing. You have the legs. Legs are what get us moving. And we have the eyes, seeing things with the eyes. It's like lights flickering. The senses coming through the eyes is very rajasic. And you have rajas, tamas of water, taste, which correlate because taste things you need water in order to get flavor. And the tongue corresponds to the taste and the water and the excretory also works as a tamas as far as a little bit of motion, but a lot of retention, getting that retentive out. The sattvic end, we have the ears, the speech, the sound, and the ether, the plasma, are the sattvic ends. It's by those, it's like when you hear divine sounds, when the best way to learn things as you're here is learning by hearing, because hearing is the clearest way to understand, to get that comprehension. And sattvic rajas, a mixture between action and essence. You have thermal on the skin, you have the arms, you have the sense of touch, and you have air between the fire and the plasma. We'll do a separate section on all of these because there's a lot more you can build out of these 20 elements that grew out of the mind and the ego. As the ego build those two, the mind holds on to those two. But that is basically where we're at, 25 elements of Prakriti and 24 of Prakriti, 1 of Purusha. So take a break, exhale. This is it, but it's only the beginning. What does this mean? How does this work? Well, the first way you can look at it is to just go up one step further and say the intellect, buddhi, is sattvic, the ego is rajasic, and the mind is tamas. And that's how we're built. We have the mind is tamas. A lot of literature, a lot of the readings you get, oh, it's tamasic, it's negative. Tamas has a lot of times a negative sense. But tamas is retention. If you don't have your mind, if you can't remember anything, then you're just reliving your same day. There is no retention of anything. So the mind is that retentive aspect. The ego is rajasic. It's the sense I am. It's continuing to change. As our ego changes, as we change, as our essence changes, it's like, okay, I'm continuing to evolve as a person. I'm continuing to change. And so that's the ego being the rajasic aspect. And the intellect, the buddhi, is our sattvic aspect. As it's our first evolute, famula prakriti, we can see that with famula prakriti, the sattvic aspect is our essence. The essence of prakriti is in the intellect. So we could go up now one step further and bring it back on up. So what is the nature of Prakriti? And the nature of Prakriti is change. Prakriti is changing. So as this is all nature, nature is always changing. People are born, they die, they move on. Yeah, fire burns. Yeah, people move. There is a sense of continuous change in the Prakriti world. In Purusha, with consciousness, there is no change. We can say the Purusha is our witness. Witness. Purusha is the witness. Purusha steps back. It gives life, awareness, consciousness to our the changing life. So now we have permanent witness that doesn't change, and you have nature, prakriti, that does change. And this becomes really the key to this whole philosophy here. Because in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is very clear and it's very insightful, but he says that things that are born will die. Things that will change must have a beginning, and if they have a beginning, they must have an end, because you cannot continuously change without a beginning and an end, because you can't, continually evolve. And so it's change. So Prakriti has a beginning and an end. Everything that has a beginning must have an end. Everything that has an end must have had a beginning. And for Purusha, this is eternal. So you have eternal Purusha, a balancing off the beginning and end of Prakriti. And this is the essence of dualistic philosophy. This is called dualism because you have two. You have nature and you have the conscious awareness of where we're at, consciousness. If you saw the presentation I posted up recently on Vedic time, you can look through that. That was presented to kind of expand the thinking in this direction, in that what the life of Brahma is 311 trillion years. A day of Brahma is 300 million years or 300 billion years. Yeah, and it's like once you start thinking of billions and trillions of years, when you're struggling to get through the day, the week, the month, it's like it's like expands the thinking. It's like, okay, what do we mean by eternal? Eternal has to be beyond 300 trillion years. It's always forever. It's the ever present. Whereas the Prakriti has a beginning and an end. Even Brahma, life of Brahma has a beginning and an end, which speaks back to, oh, Brahma must be a conscious being that's projecting his energy to create the Prakriti. And so we'll leave it here. That's a lot to digest. But this, in a really quick nutshell, is Samkhya philosophy. I'll bring it back up on another lecture and get a little bit more of what this really means for us. Thank you for your attention. Namaste.